All right. Good morning. Today is November 2nd. We are in the first week of November. Tomorrow are elections. Woohoo! Um, this week we're going to start talking about what Sertel calls the Asian complication. Okay, so you've got um, some more complex civilizations. You've got China, who manages to stay uh, pretty much isolated for quite some time, other than doing some trade on the Silk Road, and with some exception of some invaders that'll come but that are from that part of the world. And then in the and they aren't really not worried about conquering other territories at the moment. And then you have the Assyrians in the Middle East that we're going to talk about that really are one of the first like major conquering empires. They believe that they can need to branch out and civilize the uncivilized. So and then we're going to take a look at a couple nomadic groups. One of them is the Phoenicians, who bring us the alphabet that we know today, or pretty close to what we know today. And then Judaism, the Hebrews or Israelites. So, but for today's purposes, and today and Thursday's purposes, we're going to look at China first. And there's a couple questions that we need to look at. Maybe. Okay, so the first being, what were some benefits and downsides to ancient China's feudal system? So the very first thing that you need to do when looking at this question is you need to answer, well, what is China's feudal system? You've probably heard of the feudal system before, or I think you have, in the Middle Ages. Is it the same as what China had? Don't just go and don't just like look up feudal system, look at what it was like in China. And Sertel actually gives you um, a really good idea of what it looked like back then in China. So make sure that when you're defining feudal system, you look at ancient China's. And then let's look at it. What were some positives and negatives after you've found out what it was? What were some positives and negatives? Were there any positives? What were they? Do we see any effects of the feudal system, China's feudal system, or the feudal system in general, in the world today, in the United States, in Iowa? Okay, these are just some important questions to ask because it can help us understand where um, the impact of these past civilizations on us today. Okay, the second question. Fundamentally, do you think that the mandate of heaven was a moral justification to overthrow a government? Could it be used in a corrupt way? So first of all, you got to look at what was the mandate of heaven, okay? And then, okay, based on your own morals and based on the examples that they give you in the text, was there moral justification? Or was this just a corrupt way to overthrow the government and gain power for yourselves? Okay, so those are the two questions that we're going to look at to start with, and they can lead to some larger things. Okay, so let's just I'm not going to give you guys the entirety of ancient China because there is so much, and I'm going to let you guys do a little research yourselves. But I'm going to give you guys some background. Okay, so let's look at the geography of ancient China to start with. Okay, so let's open this up here. Okay, so ancient China, all right? So ancient China is basically, back then, you've got China, which is the early people, they settled along two major rivers, okay? The Huanghe, all right, which is right up through here. Then that's called the Yellow River, and the Yangtze River, which comes down south, okay? So the area between these rivers is called the North China Plain. It's really fertile. Okay, this is the most fertile place in China. Okay, and it's a very important place. Why? Because only 10% of China has arable land or farmable land. Okay, or this region at least. Okay, the overflow. We've talked already about some similarities and some things that happened in these other river valley civilizations, the Indus River Valley, Mesopotamia. and Egypt. What are some of the things that happened that are similar? Flooding would probably be the biggest thing, right? And when those civilizations, when their rivers flooded, what did it leave behind? It left behind that rich soil. In China, this soil was called loess, Loess. Okay, show you guys, see if I can find an example here of loess. Well, here's an example of the Loess Hills in Iowa, but over here, when the Missouri River would flood, that we would leave behind this nice, rich dirt called loess. Okay. All right. So the big difference here is that the Yangtze and the Yellow rivers were not predictable. Okay. You couldn't really predict where they were going to flood. Okay. Now, I mean, because of the fact that there was such rich land, it was really awesome for farming, and it was a good place to settle down if you could figure out how to mitigate the flooding. Okay, so some other things about the uh, geography. Okay, see if I can pull up this map here. Okay, you've got some mountains going on up here, right? You see that mountains over here. You got the Taklamakan Desert over here, the Gobi Desert, Plateau of Tibet, which is a fairly dry area, the Kunlun Shan Mountains, the Himalayas, mountains up here, right? This is really dry area through. Whoops, I don't want to do that. Through here, there we go. There's my circle. There's some more mountains. Okay, so not a ton of arable land or farmable land. Okay, and actually fairly. I mean, if you think about the desert, the mountains, it's. I mean, it's kind of protected well, right? And maybe isolated a little bit. Because you think about it here, you've got the Pacific Ocean, the South China Sea, the Yellow Sea. All these things are going to kind of isolate China in certain ways. Um, so So that's kind of the geography of the area. So what's the story here? Okay, how did these dynasties come about? Well, check it out here. Legend: there was a simple man and a great flood. Okay, you have this emperor, Emperor Shun. Okay, the river keeps flooding. It keeps wiping out villages. It keeps wiping out their crops. Right. So Shun's finally like, okay, I need someone who's going to help me figure this out. So he gets this dude named Yu. Okay, and he's going to find a way to, or he's going to try and find a way to stop the flood. So this takes quite some time. Okay, and here is a picture of Yu. I don't know if we'll be able to, how well we'll be able to see it, but I mean, this is obviously a drawing of Yu. But oops, I don't know what just happened, so I'm just going to do that. Yu is down here. Okay, what he does is he figures out a way to kind of like divert the water to the ocean and to other rivers. What that is going to do is it's going to kind of dry up that area and make it safer for people, more predictable for people to live. Okay, because he solved that problem for Emperor Shun. Shun said, "Okay, I'm going to give you the title of emperor now." Okay, and Yu accepted, and basically the first Chinese dynasty, the Xia. I know it looks like it's XIA, but it's pronounced Xia, was born. Okay. Now, there is actually really no definitive evidence for the Xia dynasty, um, or that there was a flood that lasted for 20 years, but it is still taught in traditional Chinese history. What we definitely know, okay, is that early Neolithic people settled in 2000s BCE, and they settled along the Yellow and the Yangtze rivers. Okay, they were farming villages. They produced rice in the south and millet in the north, which is a millet's a grain of sorts. Okay, around the 1600s, this king named Cheng Tang of the Shang Kingdom. There's a bunch of different kingdoms in this area. He's the dude that rises to power. Okay, and he's going to be the one that has the influence to start with. And supposedly he overthrows the Xia emperor in the Battle of Mingtiao. All right, the Shang. A little bit about them. Religion. They were polytheistic. Okay, that means many gods, right? But their main god was Shangdi. His name means highest deity. He controlled victory in battle, weather, harvest. He pretty much controlled everything. Okay. Now he was important to the people. However, um, and people sought him in all kinds of times of uncertainty. All right, but he was also seen as this distant being, one that he wasn't necessarily really accessible to the people. Okay, so what did that mean? It meant that it was the emperor's responsibility to intervene, to or intercess, as we would call it. Right, the emperor was kind of like the mouthpiece for Shangdi, for the god. Okay. So basically, like I say here, if the rivers flooded or a battle was lost or whatever, the emperor was the one who was blamed, not the gods. Okay, because maybe he interpreted it wrong, or maybe he upset the gods in some way. Okay. In addition to Shangdi, Chinese, and there still is some of this to the day. There's a bit of ancestor worship. Okay, they talked to their ancestors, chilled with them. Their dead ancestors, right? They would have maybe some little idols and things like that that represented who their ancestors were. Okay, um, this tradition, as well as holding the honor of the family above the desires of the individual, is going to forever influence Chinese culture, right? And so here we have just a little example of that, and you guys have sure have seen this before, um, maybe.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct, but it's
Here we go. This is ancestor worship. The ancestors are.
So tell me what model needs my protection, great ancestor. You just say the word and I'm there. Mushu. And let me say something. Anybody who's foolish enough to threaten our family, vengeance will be mine. Mushu. These are the family gods. They protect the family. And you, O devoted one. I bring the god. That's right. Now, wake up the ancestors. One family reunion coming right up. Okay, people look alive. Let's go. Come on, get up. Move it right now. We're all way past the beauty sleep thing. Trust me.
I knew it. That Mulan was a troublemaker from the start.
Don't look at me. She gets it from your side of the family.
She's just trying to help her father.
But if she's discovered, you will be forever shamed. Dishonor will come to the family. Traditional values will disintegrate. Not to mention they'll lose the farm.
My children never caused such trouble. They all became acupuncturists.
Well, we can't all be acupuncturists.
No, your great-granddaughter had to be a cross-dresser.
Let the guardian bring her back.
Yes, awaken the most cunning. No, the swiftest. No, send the wisest.
Silence! We must send the most powerful of all. Okay, I get the drift out. The only thing I can do. Watch this here. Jump back, I'm pretty hot, huh? Maybe I send you, but I proved no point. You had your chance to protect the Power family.
Your misguidance led Fontaine to disaster.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And your point is? The point is, we will be sending a real dragon to retrieve Mulan. What? I'm a real dragon! You are not worthy of this spot. Now, awaken the great stone dragon. So you get back to me on the job then?
All right. So that's obviously a funny, silly example of their ancestor worship and how the ancestors played a role in their lives. And there's a point in the movie also where Milan goes and she prays to him, and she even sings a song, I think. sort of to them. So, but that's their religion. All right. They had this one main god, and then they also had the ancestor worship. Okay. Politics. All right. Shang emperors served a more sacred. They served a more sacred than political role, right? Because they were intercessors from God. They got their power and their everything from the gods. So, um, policy and lawmaking carried out by a chosen council of administrators and advisors. Okay. Basically, they had a feudal system also. All right. So let's just check this out here. Let's look at what a feudal system looked like in ancient China. Okay, so you had the king at the top here. Okay, they grant the use of the land to nobles in exchange for their loyalty. Okay, now the nobles are going to be your knights and princes and blah blah blah. Okay, the nobles, they give loyalty and they give armies to the king. Okay, in exchange for that land. Okay, the peasants, they work the land for the nobles in exchange for shelter, protection, and food. And then finally, merchants. They're lower status than peasants because riches come from others' work, not their own. Okay, so that's feudalism in the Chinese time period. Okay, the governmental center of the country where laws and policies was discussed was the capital of Anyang. This city was built mainly of wood, and it was surrounded by a massive earthen wall. Okay, the rich and powerful lived inside the wall, while the poorer folks and craftspeople lived outside the wall in huts. Okay, makes sense. I'm kidding. It doesn't. Everybody should be protected by the wall. Writing. Archaeologists, they've uncovered a lot of artifacts in Anyang. Okay, an early writing system called Jiaguan was developed. It served mainly religious purposes at that time. Okay. Now here's the kicker: 5,000 characters in the pictograph system. Okay, so you'll notice down here what other civilization had similar writing? You guys remember? There were kind of two that had similar pictogram writings that we've talked about so far. Just think about that for a second. Most of the Shang couldn't even read it. Okay, you had to know at least about 1,500 characters to be literate. Okay, out of 5,000 characters. Okay, the Shang wrote on oracle bones. That's these things right here. I don't really have. That's the biggest picture. You can blow it up if you'd like to, but they wrote on oracle bones. Okay, they were shells or of animals used for divination, okay, or predicting the future. Kings would ask the questions to their diviners. They would say, "Hey, we're going to win the battle," and then the question would be written on the oracle bone and a hot poker taken to it, right? And it caused the bone to crack. They would look at these cracks and be like, "Oh, well, this crack means blah blah blah," right? So the other thing that they were used for was to record the reign of kings and tell stories of war. Okay, so those are the first purposes. All right, some cool stuff. The Shang not only had a writing system, but they did develop a lunar calendar. Okay, so if we check this out, this is what one of the lunar calendars look like. I couldn't find the age on this one to see if it was an earlier or later version, but it is an example of one of early China's lunar calendars. Whoops, I don't know what I did. What did I do? Did I close my dadgum notes? Okay, so let me just go back into my notes. Recent. I'm hoping that this is, well, it's taken a while here. Module 3 notes, here we go. I apologize for the delay here. Okay. Whoops. It's slow because I think it's slow because I'm recording. Okay. So back down here to the cool stuff. They also created their own chariot. Okay. Look here. Here's an example. There was a ton of different examples of their own chariots. Um, I'm thinking this is one of the very first that they came up with. Man, everything's so slow.
Reminder to all staff that we'll have the volleyball send off at 9:20. If all staff come down to the front of the building at 9:20, that'd be great. Thank you.
Just in case you didn't know, there's a volleyball send off at 9:20. Okay, well, while that's pulling that up, let's continue to. Oh, did it come up? It did. Okay, so check this out. It's pretty okay. I think it's a pretty intelligent design here, right? Look at all the different things that they diagrammed, and how you've got a crossbar up here to hold your person in, sideboards to protect from wheels, a carriage just basically to hold them in, a shaft, okay, a yoke which can be obviously animal can pull and things like that. So, pretty impressive early model. Um, okay, they also produced jade carvings for religious ceremonies, and jade is still something that's important in the Far East. Okay, they introduced some new mathematical concepts. I know that all of you math lovers out there enjoy this kind of thing. So here is some examples of that right there. Number system. They didn't. They created a new way of casting bronze. Okay, they didn't use this the same method the Mesopotamians used. Okay, they used piece mold casting, and I believe that that is like casting each piece in a separate thing and then somehow putting it together in like a separate piece. Like if you want to have an oval, you create a piece that's kind of like that, and you pour the stuff in there, and then if you want to connect it to something else, you do it that way. It may seem like early Chinese civilizations were slower to innovate than other civilizations. However, you have to think about this, right? Geographically, these early civilizations lived in a region that wasn't necessarily the easiest to access from the outside, right? I talked about the mountains and the sea and things like that, the desert, okay? That causes some problems. Now, here's the other thing, okay? And this is interesting. And we can talk more about this in class or on Wednesday, but geographically, the early civilizations, sorry, I just read that. These people believed that they were the center of civilization. They called themselves the Middle Kingdom. Okay, they called themselves that because they believed that everybody outside of them were barbarians. Okay, they believed that they were pretty much the center of everything, and everybody else was barbarians. Okay, and there may be some things that help them come up with that, like outside invaders, but we get to that later. All right. The fall of the Shang dynasty. Okay. The Shang did make some great accomplishments. Okay. However, a group of people called the Zhou, that looks like, let's see, I think I do. I've got the
trillions in new taxes, packing courts, defunding police. Vote Joni Ernst to stop the liberal takeover.
I can't wait till that's done. Here we go. This is how it's pronounced.
Joe.
So kind of Zhou, right? Okay, so the Zhou are led by this dude named Wu. Okay, their goal was to overthrow the corrupt Shang king, Di Zin. Okay, now Di Zin had a big old force, but they still were not going to be able to take over or to stop the Zhou. Okay, some of the Shang army actually refused to fight. Okay, and eventually the Zhou are victorious. Now, here's the thing. In order to justify what the Zhou did, okay, they claimed that the Shang were no longer justly ruling, that they were corrupt. Okay, and this led to the idea of the mandate of heaven. Okay, mandate of heaven declared that there could be only one ruler in power at a time, and this ruler had the blessing of the gods. So let's check this out here. I've got a little clip, or not clip, but a little diagram. So check this out. A strong dynasty establishes peace and prosperity it's considered to have the mandate of heaven. Okay, in other words, the gods are saying, "Hey, we're good. You're good with us. You're good people." Right? Over time, what's going to happen? The dynasty is going to decline. It's going to become corrupt. Taxes are raised. Now, whether that's corrupt in the eyes of the people or in the eyes of just the people who want to overthrow them, I'm not sure. Okay. And then following that, you get disasters such as floods, famines, peasant revolts, and invasions. Those things start to occur. The old dynasty, basically, they've lost the mandate of heaven. Okay, so they no longer have ruling authority from the gods. The gods are taking it away, and that's why things are failing. Okay, and so that means it's time to overthrow them. Right, so they overthrow the dynasty, and a new dynasty emerges. New dynasty gains power, restores peace and order, and claims to have the mandate of heaven. The gods are on their sides now, right? Okay. This is how a lot of times in the ancient dynasties, a new dynasty would overthrow the old dynasty. They would use the idea of the mandate of heaven. Okay. I'll let you guys check out the video on your own. Not even 4 years, though, of Zhou rule had passed before rebellion sprang up on them. Okay, the rebellion of the three guards. Now it's not gonna last. It's not gonna. They're not gonna. The Shang aren't gonna be able to retake it over. Okay, basically, this Dan Duke of Zhou is going to defeat the traitors immediately. Okay. All right. So let's look at the Zhou. Okay. Their accomplishments. They had quite a few things. Okay, they mass produced the crossbow. Now, if you think about why that's important, you can load it a lot faster. It can go a lot farther. It's easier to handle. Okay, it's not as big, depending on what you're trying to shoot. Okay, they dig canals for better control of the flooding of the rivers. If you have canals, you have a place for the water to go, and you can direct it better. Laid out roads. Right, if you put roads down, it's way easier to travel. Just think if we were still all on dirt roads, just dirt roads traveling from here and there, how much longer it would take. Now, right, though we have these nice smooth, well, most of the time, nice smooth highways and interstates, makes things so much quicker, and they're direct routes, right? So very intelligent of these guys. They introduced coin money. Circular coins made of copper, iron, gold, and silver, right? Probably they had different values each. Now, think about this for a second. And I think I put a little note. Yeah, right here. How did the creation of a coinage system improve trade as well as unite the empire? So I want you guys to think about that. All right. The most impressive accomplishment, though, was probably the blast furnace. I think I got a picture of that here. Now, there's a bunch of them that they create over time, but here is an example of one. It's water driven. This pumped air in and superheated this right here, right? Much more efficient than just hand pumping it in. Okay. So with that, they're able to create. They're able to craft metal. Metal is going to, using different kinds of metal is going to make farming easier. Okay. It becomes more efficient. They also have superior weapons, which allows easier victories. Okay. Now there's two periods of time in the Zhou dynasties. Okay. There's the Western Zhou and the Eastern Zhou. And there's a point in time where the North is going to attack the capital and they're going to kill the emperor. Okay. When that happens, the empire is going to split, okay, to a second capital. Okay. So this is going to be also known as the spring and autumn period, lasting from about 771 to 476 BC. There's roughly between that time, so it's not quite 300 years, 100 different kings fighting for supremacy of the country. I want you guys to think about that for a second. Having 100 different kings fighting for supremacy of the country, what is that going to do to the landscape? What is that going to do to the farming? What's that going to do to the economy? Think about that. Let's discuss that. Okay. This was a time of war, but also philosophical thought. Okay, gave rise to early Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism, which we'll discuss later on. Okay, by the end of this period, 7 serious contenders for supremacy of the land remained, and the Warring States period began. Which, I mean, if you think about it, they've been warring for the last 300 years. Why not continue? Eventually, a group known as the Qin, I know it looks like Qin, but Qin are going to emerge victorious. And under their dynasty, the lands of China are going to be unified again. Okay, that's a brief on China. I've got some other information that I'm going to have you guys look through. Okay, I'm going to have you guys go through this lesson right here, but we'll get to that. I'll put the information for that on the Metcalf Remote Doc. I hope you guys have a good week and enjoy your day. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you later.